This animated chart tracks global religious affiliation over the last few decades. The data reveals a massive shift. The unaffiliated, or the nones, are surging into the number 3 spot globally, right behind Christianity and Islam. For many in that growing demographic, the modern Christian brand is defined by specific points of friction. In recent surveys, those outside the faith frequently describe the church as anti-science, money-grubbing, and focused more on political coercion than spiritual care. Faced with this loss of influence, some believers retreat into a nostalgic era of cultural dominance. They attempt to reclaim authority through a mixture of nationalistic pride and aggressive public stances, a strategy often described as cage fights and crosses. Sociological research suggests this defensive posture is actually fueling the crisis. The people leaving the faith cite this very same judgmental, arrogant tone as their primary reason for actively and vehemently rejecting the church. This cultural battle often relies on the idea that the United States was explicitly founded to be a Christian nation, creating a mandate for believers to take the country back. The historical record points elsewhere. Of the 7 primary founding fathers, only one would be considered an Orthodox Christian today. The Constitution they authored avoids religious mandates entirely, creating a free experiment where no one can be coerced into a specific faith. The modern church's anxiety over living in a pluralistic, non-Christian society mirrors the exact environment of the first disciples. They occupied a world where their message was considered irrelevant, sexual deviant, and a threat to public order. Survival in this environment requires a return to Jesus' final in-person conversation, the Great Commission. Reclaiming this mission means unlearning centuries of strategic baggage and instead looking at what the text actually demands. In the Gospel of Matthew, the surviving 11 disciples gather on a mountain in Galilee. In Matthew's theology, mountains are where new truths are spoken and new actions are required. The ancient manuscript contains a startling detail. Verse 17 says they worshipped him, but they also doubted. The Greek word, distazo, means an immobilized wavering. The mission was entrusted to people who were double-minded and confused, even in the presence of the risen Christ. Jesus addresses this wavering by claiming all authority. In modern English, authority often implies political jurisdiction, the right to rule or command. The Greek word is exousia. It refers to the delegated influence Jesus had been using throughout his ministry, the capacity, ability, and privilege to minister in God's name. This authority is explicitly tied to continuing the work Jesus had already done, healing, feeding, and offering freedom to the marginalized. It is the strength to serve rather than the power to coerce. This network graph illustrates hit-and-run evangelism, scattered, disconnected interactions designed to get notches on a belt. But the command mateteu, to make disciples, means to instruct a pupil. It requires the long-term, harder work of building communities and helping people become students of God's will. This work is extended to all nations, or ethne. In the first century, this was a radical departure for a group that believed God's promises were for a specific people only. It left no one out, including ideological enemies and social outcasts. Early Christians were viewed as dangerous precisely because they ignored these boundaries. They were seen as bad citizens because they wouldn't bow to the emperor, choosing instead an inclusive kinship that threatened the Roman social order. The Great Commission was designed as an exercise in boundary breaking. It forces the follower away from tribal isolation and toward the loving embrace of a world that thinks differently. Somewhere between the mountain in Galilee and today, the church's original vulnerability was replaced by an obsession with being definitively right on every subject. Loud certainty and rigid judgment often act as defense mechanisms. They provide a sense of control, but frequently mask a deep fear of the unknown. Moving away from this fear requires a quiet softening, the spiritual practice of unclenching the fists and listening. It begins with the sentence, "Tell me more." This shift moves the believer away from winning a debate and toward a genuine encounter. It prioritizes awe and curiosity over the need for a closed-fist defense of the truth. Redefining the command to go for a modern world means finding ways to share space with those we have named enemy. It requires sharing stories and becoming comfortable with questions that have no easy answers. The text of the commission places no requirement on the believer to force a conversion or condemn another's life. According to the Gospel of John, that was not even Jesus' job. The mission is to act as a delivery system for unconditional love. It is the work of using our authority, our capacity and mastery, to offer healing and durable hope to those in need. True faith requires being quiet enough to hear the life beneath the life. By abandoning the need for dominance and embracing our own unfinished nature, we finally become small enough to fit inside mercy.